substance abuse do you think of college kids? There are many colleges in the United States that have a lot of students who abuse drugs and alcohol. Having a public speaker could decrease the abuse of substances by answering questions college kids do not think to ask, like where to seek help and what could happen if they continue on the path they are on. As a student at Kutztown University, I have done my research on why we need a public speaker here to talk about the fact that there is a problem and what they could say to help the students. Kutztown should have a public speaker about substance abuse because they could tell students where and how to find help, the number of students who abuse drugs and alcohol, and the consequences for those actions. First of all, rather than having a public speaker talk about multicultural topics and powerful women, we should have someone who can give an insight about how many college students have an addiction to drugs, who could give and or alcohol, and what could happen because of the abuse of drugs and alcohol. According to the Addiction Center, 80% of college students have abused alcohol. Only 31% of students have reported themselves to have abused alcohol, which means that there are many students who have not reported themselves to have a problem. It could be because it is hard to admit that they have an addiction, or because they do not think they have a problem. A public speaker can make it more known that there are other kids just like them. Research has also shown that males are more likely than females to both abuse drugs and face severe consequences for it, including arrest, injury, and even death. On the college drinking website, it lists the consequences of alcohol abuse. About 1,825 college students between the ages of 18 and 24 die from alcohol-related and unintentional injuries, including motor vehicle crashes. There are also about 1 in 4 college students that report academic consequences from drinking, including missing class, falling behind in class, doing poorly on exams, and receiving lower grades overall. There are also other consequences like suicide attempts, health problems, injuries, unsafe sex, and driving under the influence of alcohol, along with vandalism, property damage, and involvement with the police. A public speaker can make students aware of how serious abusing alcohol and drugs are. There are many reasons why students drink. In an article of the Affordable College website, it provides many statements college students may say is the reason why they drink. For instance, they may say because everyone is doing it. Greek life is also a prime reason why students drink. They just want to fit in. It is also a coping mechanism for the students who are stressed or overwhelmed. Having a public speaker talk about how many students abuse alcohol and drugs, the consequences of the abuse, and the many reasons students think it is okay to drink would allow students to open their eyes and see that there is a problem on campus. Secondly, a public speaker can talk about how and where to be treated. On the Addiction Center website, it includes how to get sober and which ways may be better for each person. They mention the detox process, which allows the drugs to leave the person's body. The public speaker can touch on the side effects of detoxing, like being uncomfortable and it's dangerous at times. There's also the behavioral treatment, which helps people that suffer from eating disorders and anxiety. On the website, it talks about how there are treatment centers which allow college students to still go to class. The public speaker could also talk about the cost of being treated for drug and alcohol abuse. On the Evergreen Rehab Center's webpage, it mentions that the rehab centers people see on TV are very expensive, so most people don't go to them. They also talk about how there are state-run facilities which allow people to have free treatments. They also mention that there are resources and plans to allow people to pay for the treatments. Having a public speaker talk about the price of getting sober may make poor college students think twice before picking up the next drink. A speaker could also talk about where the local rehab facilities are in Kutztown. They could talk about the Reading Hospital on the Find Rehab Center's webpage. They describe Reading Hospital as a hospital that focuses on substance abuse, and that is their top priority. It also mentions that they do many screenings for drugs. Having a public speaker talk about the nearest treatment center may make students take that extra step to get the help they need, especially since they know where to go. Lastly, there are many public figures that talk about the problems they went through with addiction of both drugs and alcohol, and they could come to Kutztown to talk about what they have gone through. For instance, Demi Lovato is a mental health advocate, and she explains her story for the billboards. She grew up with a dad who was an alcoholic and her mom who was bulimic, which is an eating disorder. She struggled growing up in these conditions. When she started acting for many movies and TV shows, she started abusing drugs to relieve her stress from all the high expectations. In an article in US Today, she explains how she tries to get the message out there for kids who are using drugs to cope for high stress situations, and college is a very stressful situation for many kids. Bradley Cooper also had experience with drug and alcohol abuse. Cooper suffered from depression and suicidal thoughts. He is now 11 years sober, and they state that he owes his career to his sobriety. Today, Cooper is an inspiration to anyone dealing with depression and addiction. It just goes to show that anyone can develop an addiction and anyone can find recovery. There are many more celebrities who have struggles with abuse of drugs and alcohol that kept it hidden, like the country singer Keith Urban. In an article on The Boot, he talks about how many of his fans see him as the big shot artist with no problems in the world, but he has many as the ordinary person. In the late 90s is when he really started drinking, because when he was not on stage, he felt insecure about many things. It got to the point where he did not think he was going to be alive the next day, and he was not worried. In 2006, his wife staged an intervention to get him to go back to rehab. It was the third time he was there in 8 years. After the third time, he finally sobered up, and he has a huge career in music. He would be a great guest speaker because it took him a few pushes to sober up, and he may want to talk about how hard it was to stop having drugs and drinking for many years. In conclusion, a public speaker about substance abuse would allow students to get information about how to get the help they need, and if the speaker is someone in the public eye, there's a more chance that the students will listen to them. So I would like you to sign a petition to allow a public speaker about this topic on campus. Thank you for listening to my speech on why we should get a public speaker about substance abuse.